Hey, how you doing? My name is Robert Williams, and this is my first YouTube video, and I'm going to talk about something that I really don't want to talk about, but I decided to look at COVID-19, take a look at the numbers, and the reason I did this is because COVID-19 has been terrifying. It really has. You look at these numbers, and you're looking at how many infections and how many deaths, and you're watching the news, and it's just scaring you. And so what I said was, okay, let me look at the numbers myself personally and see how bad this thing is. And what I did was I looked at it for four different regions. I looked at it, of course, for globally for the world. I looked at it in the United States. I looked at it in the state of Georgia, which is where I live, United States, state of Georgia, and Canada, which is where my family lives. And what I did was I did probably three different things. I compared the infection and death rate to the actual population, which gives you really good numbers. I can't lie, they're going to be real positive numbers. I also looked at the rate of infection. The killer with coronavirus is how quickly it's infecting people. And then I looked at the ratio of death from coronavirus to infection from coronavirus. So let's dive into it. Before I dive into it, I want to show you where I got some of my data from. And I'll show you right now. So there's a lot of different sites that'll give you information or statistics on coronavirus, and really they track the infection rates and the death rates. If you Google it, I think the first one you're going to come up with is called Worldometer. And Worldometer, like I said, it's I'm not sure where they get their numbers from. The numbers aren't too far off of other numbers, but because I wasn't sure of the source, I looked at some other areas. So I looked at the World Health Organization and got global numbers, and also looking from week to week what the increases were in those numbers. I looked at the CDC. And what I'll do is I'll put these links for these websites down below so that you can go look at these numbers yourself. If you're curious about it, if you want to know some more or dive into it yourself. So the CDC has numbers for the United States. So I focus there for the United States. They actually send you to another site called USA Facts. And right away, that's one of the things you'll notice is some of the numbers will be off by thousands when you look from site to site. Just depends where you're looking. So CDC had one set of numbers, USA Facts, slightly off, 3 or 4,000 off. Then finally for Georgia, I went to Georgia's Department of Health site and looked at their numbers for coronavirus. So what I did was I took all these numbers and I put them together in a nice spreadsheet. And what I was really trying to look at was the differences or how things were changing from week to week. And I started with March 1st, which is when things really started hitting the fan, right up until May 10th, and just tracking those numbers. So I don't want you to just stare at a spreadsheet. That's going to be really boring. So I took some time and put together a presentation for you. I'm going to get that presentation up, and then we're going to look at this, and hopefully this will be informative. I'm really hoping this is data that I'm sharing that will help someone understand it, and maybe put your mind at ease. Hopefully not worry you more, but put your mind at ease, give you something else to reference this to. So let's go ahead and get this presentation up for you. Boom. All right, so let's start. So this is the world compared to the coronavirus. Infections, just infections only. So the world population, 7.8 billion people, and there are 4.1 million people infected by coronavirus. That's a lot of people, but when you compare it to the population, the ratio is really 0.05%. It's less than a percent. You'll notice this trend with every region that I look at. When you compare it to population, it's really small. Now, what do I mean by really small? Well, if you say 1%, that's 1 in every 100 people. If you go below 1%, you're starting to get into like 1 per 1,000, 1 per 10,000. So in terms of being infected, it just seems low, even though it was spreading so quickly. So we'll go through these numbers real quickly. So that was the world. The USA, we have 331 million people. We have 1.3 million infections. Again, the rate is lower than 1%. It's 0.39. Canada, 69,000 infections versus 38 million people, 0.18%. Again, all of these are below 1%. I'm not going to show you anything that's above 1%. Georgia, same thing, 0.3%, 35,000 people infected. So as you can see, if you compare this to population, it really puts your mind at ease, because it's like it's not as widespread as it looks like when you look at the numbers and you say, okay, there's 4 million infections worldwide. Well, that 4 million number seems so bad. Or even the United States, we're at 1.2 or 1.3 billion. Sorry, 1.3 million. We don't even have a billion people. 1.3 million people. That's a lot. But not when you compare it to the actual population of our country. I'm going to show you deaths compared to population, because it's even smaller. Now, listen, let's go back. I don't want to minimize death. That's not my whole goal in this. I'm not trying to say, oh no, look at it, it's just a little bit of death. Death is death. If it's one person dying, it's death. But I believe that people go to heaven, and I believe in Jesus. So I'm not going to say I don't worry about it, but I just don't want to minimize it. So let's just go ahead and talk about it and get it out the way. So deaths, 280,000 deaths worldwide. But again, when you compare it to 7.8 billion, the ratio gets even really low. Let's go to the United States. 80,000 people. So 80,000 people out of 331 million. Again, that's even less than 0.1%. Same thing for Canada. They've had 5,000 deaths. They've been able to keep things lower. But as you're going to see, even Canada, their rate of growth has been intense, just like everybody else's. The graphs are very similar as you go from country to country or area to area. And then in the state of Georgia, where I live, we've had 1,500 deaths compared to 10 million people. Again, the numbers seem really small in terms of when you look at population. So that puts your mind at ease. That probably eases a lot of the thoughts that are in your mind, because again, if you just look at the infection numbers and the death numbers, if you just look at coronavirus numbers, you'll freak out, right? So you have to compare it with something else. So the next thing I'm going to show you is infection rate, because this was the thing that I think makes coronavirus the most dangerous, and what everybody's really concerned about is how quickly it spreads. And this is from March to May. So remember, in March, especially in the US, if you're in a European country, it'll be different. But in the US, we really weren't paying attention to it, quite honestly. We were thinking it was something overseas, and then they started paying attention to it, and then they started looking for making sure people can get tested. And then we put shelter in place rules and staying in your house and stuff like that, and things changed. So let's have a look at that. So as you can see here, this is for the world. We start off at 87,000 in beginning of March. We're now up to close to 4 million. Horrible numbers in terms of how quickly in a short time frame. In the flip side, if this was money, this would be quite the investment, right? But it's not. These are people getting infected with a deadly disease, potentially deadly disease. So here's where I want to talk about the silver lining. I'm going to show you these graphs. They're all going to look the same. All these graphs are going to look the same. You're going to see the same rise in infections at a tremendous rate. And really, that rate started at the beginning, 24%, 52%. You see these rising very quickly. The silver lining is that for every region I'm looking at, these last few weeks in March, that infection rate has slowed down. So at one point, it was a difference of 78% from week to week in terms of growth. Now it's down to 17%. This is worldwide. Let's go to the United States. The United States, now, as you can see, we started off real flat, right? We started off real flat and then went through the roof, right? 700, 800%, growth or change. Just crazy amount of infections, but that's also us going through testing and detecting infection, right? Now, as you can see for the last few weeks, we have dropped tremendously in terms of like growth from week to week. And that's what those red numbers are. These red numbers, these red percentages are comparing like this week and the week previous, looking at the difference in infections and then giving you a percentage. So that's how I'm coming up with this number. I haven't seen this anywhere else, but my assumption is this is what the government is looking at when they're saying, hey, we can let people out again. So let's look at Canada. Canada has gone through the same thing. Even though the numbers are much lower in Canada, they've gone through the same thing where they've gone from 19 to 60,000 people who have been infected. Again, though, in these last few weeks, or even the last 4 weeks, they have also decreased the rate at which people are getting infected. And last is Georgia, where I live. Same sort of graph. You notice that the trend is the same no matter where you're looking. But again, it is slowed down. Georgia's actually slowed down to less than 10%, from week to week. Now, what's going to be interesting is what does this mean, like in terms of as the governments are opening up, allowing people to go back out in public. What does this mean? Does this mean that these rates are going to shoot back up? Does this mean that it's a miracle and for us, unknown reason, this is what I'm praying for, unknown reason, the rates are slowing down, this thing goes away? That would be the absolute best case scenario. But I'm just looking at the numbers. So what I might do, if you like this video, if you give me some good comments, I get some good feedback, I might come back 2 weeks from now and give you some more data to see where we're at, or maybe 3 weeks from now, we'll see. But let's continue to look at the numbers. So the next thing that I looked at, and this is the more negative side of this, is I was really curious about the death rate for this disease, or this virus. So if I contract it, what are my chances of dying? That's really, it's like, oh, you get flu-like symptoms. Well, I'm not really worried about having flu-like symptoms. I'm worried about dying. So I looked at the number of deaths compared to the number of infections. And I got to say, and please comment if you feel this way too. I thought I was told at one point, or I saw in some news article or some news report, that they were talking about this infecting this killing 1% to 3% of people that were infected. And they were saying that compared to some other, to the regular flu or flu-like viruses, that was really high. The death rate for the regular flu was a lot lower. Well, as I'm going to show you, when I looked at the numbers, I'm not getting the 1 to 3%. And let's just go ahead and look at it. So here's for the world, and what you're looking at, the blue bars are the number of deaths from week to week. Okay, and it's the total number of deaths. So this graph, there's less than 300,000 worldwide. It's not, you don't add up all these bars, but anyways, when you look at the red percentage numbers, are the ratio of number of deaths to the infections. So even in the world in March, we started off at 3%, and it has grown to 7%. So it's kind of concerning because it's increasing. Let's go to the US. The US is the same thing. Now, of course, we went from 0, had a jump, and then we've kind of leveled off, but 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, we're at 6%. Death rate, death compared to being infected by this. If I go to Canada, same thing. The numbers are different, but the trend is the same, right? They went from 0%, again, 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, 6%. They're at 7%. Um, and to me, that's concerning. That's concerning that the death rate for this thing is rising. And in Georgia, not as drastic, not up to 6 or 7%, but we're up to 4%. Again, going from 1% to 4%. Not sure what that means. I don't. I'm just looking at the numbers, right? I'm not a doctor. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a mathematician. I'm a smart guy, and I just started looking at the numbers, and this is what I came up with. So I hope that gives you a little bit more information on, or a different way of looking at the coronavirus. I think is probably a better way of putting it, because a lot of times you're just given, okay, infections and deaths, and you're just giving these numbers, and they just keep increasing, and they just seem crazy. What we found out is if you compare it to the population of an area, the numbers are really, really small for infection or death with coronavirus. No denying it has spread very quickly, especially when we were not social distancing. It has spread very, very quickly. Concerning is that if you look at the death compared to number of infections, it seems to be increasing. There might be some reasons for that. It might be just the gathering the statistics of infections, and defining a death as a corona death. Maybe the length of time that's taken to happen. So it's like, there could be a whole bunch of people infected at the beginning, no one died, and then the death toll increased over time. I don't know. I'm making things up, but that's the coronavirus, right? So that's the world we live in. My name's Robert. I'm hoping to give you different content. This was something quick and easy I could put together. I just started going crazy with the numbers. I wanted to share it with you. I'm going to do some different things, so come back and check me out. Leave some comments below. I'll try and put some information below. First time YouTube video. Hope you like it, and take care. Be safe. Bye.